Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com. Today we are in round 4 of our coverage of the 2019 U.S. Chess Championship. Our competitors today, White's going to be played by Jeffrey Xiong. We've covered a game from him earlier in the tournament. His opponent, Ray Robson, 24-year-old. He was the 2009 U.S. Junior Champion at the time when he was 14 and became the youngest Grandmaster, taking that title from Nakamura. No longer holds it, but still he's been one of the up-and-coming youngsters in American chess. So excited to see these two competitors square off. Starts out with Pawn E4, Pawn E5, Knight F3, Knight C6, getting into the Rai Lopez with Bishop to B5. And then Knight to F6, castle on the king's side. So this is the Berlin defense. Seems like we saw this a couple of years ago in almost every single game. Haven't seen it quite as often, but showing up here in the U.S. Chess Championship. So after pawn to D4, which is one of the more common lines that we do see, knight back to D6, pawn captures here, and then the knight takes on B5. So right away, black does have the bishop pair here. There's a couple ways that white can continue to get back the material. Decides to go ahead and first play pawn A4. No real good square for the knight to go to. It is going to fall at some point. Decides to come back here, and then the exchange in the center of the board. Queen to D4, pawn to D5. Could take if he wanted to. Decides to go and just bring his queen back here to D3, and then pawn G6. Getting ready to fianchetto on the king side of the board, bring the bishop here to G7, castle on the king side if Ray Robson would like to. Knight to C3, simple development move. Pawn to C6, solidifying the pawn chain on the queen side of the board. Bishop to E3, just getting that in the center of the board here. Also attacking the pawn on A7 in case this rook wants to move anywhere. It is attacking that pawn. Bishop coming to F5, just getting it outside, developed, and attacking the queen right here. So the queen does fall back to D2. And then queen to A5. So Robson being pretty aggressive on the board right now. Rook to E1, just centralizing. Both sides just trying to figure out how they are going to attack their opponent. And seeing as how the king is still here on E8, has not castled on either side of the board. Decides to go ahead and bring his rook over here, start to attack. And then Ray castles on the queen side. Doesn't have a ton of protection as far as, pawns in front. So there could be an attack that Jeffrey could have here on the queen side of the board. But decides to go ahead and castle on the queen side. And then pawn to E6. An interesting move. If you see how white is going to continue here, maybe bishop to D4, opening up the door for the rook to now defend this pawn. That seems like a pretty decent option. But pawn to E6, giving up this pawn, and you kind of have to look at the board and say, how is he going to get back that material? What advantage is he going to get if he's going to give up a pawn and material? So pawn to E6, the bishop's going to recapture here. Bishop to G5, attacking the rook. Rook comes to D7. Bishop to F6, attacking the rook. Rook comes back to G8. Queen to E3, so just doubling up here, also attacking this pawn on A7. The queen currently is protecting it, and then the bishop comes down here to B4. So right away, it's not exactly clear how white's going to get back that material. Black definitely has the advantage in my book just from a material standpoint, and I don't see a clear attack that white has. Decides to go ahead and bring his rook to D1, so getting away from the double attack on the E file. Now maneuvers over here to D1. Bishop to F5, so attacking this pawn here on C2. And then a very interesting move in the game, and it's knight to B5. Now this move definitely looks tricky. If black takes here, it opens up for a lot of attacks that white has on this king. It's kind of out in the open here. There's now an isolated pawn. The pawn could take here on B5, opening up the door to attack the queen here. If the queen moves, then the queen can come up here, take on A7, assuming that the queen moves here. So lots of threats that black has to worry about. This is really the best move. Black would have a huge advantage if he decides to go ahead and take here, because there's no real way to continue the attack. Maybe queen comes back here, bishop to C5, attacking the queen, and white's threats have stopped. Black can easily defend this, but in the game it just looked too tricky, and so Ray Robson decides instead to bring his bishop and come down, capture on c2. Just something didn't feel right. Says, Jeffrey's a nice guy. There's just no way he's going to give up his knights here. But if you're Jeffrey, you got to try something. You're down that pawn of material. Almost feel like he looked at this position, said, yeah, okay, I gotta be pretty aggressive. My opponent's castled on the queen side, not a lot of protection as far as pawns. So even if I have to give up material, I need to try something. So he takes with his bishop here on c2. Rook to c1. This also does open up. There's a semi-open file that this rook can attack here. So after the bishop comes to f5, you see the knight come up to a7. This is definitely different after the bishop comes and takes this pawn on c2, and then the rook maneuvers here. Now it would definitely be a bad move for the pawn to take, because now we could just see pawn take here, attacking the queen. If the queen takes on b5, then just rook here to c2 check. Things are not going to be good. Maybe rook to c7. Queen over here to h3 check. King to b8. Bishop here to f5, pinning down the rook. Things are not going to go well for black. So had an opportunity to take the pawn or the knight there on b5, but now that he did not, does not want to make that mistake now. So that brings the bishop back here to f5. So the knight takes on a7 check. King over here to b8. Knight to b5. King over here to a8. Another one of those times where it would be bad to take with the pawn here. After the pawn takes, you could see huge threat now. If the queen moves, first we could see the pawn here, bishop to e5, but as soon as that queen were to move, the queen could come up here to a7. But in this position, even here, king to a7, bishop comes down to d4, taking material here. Things are just not going to go well for black. So correctly decides not to take the knight. It is now a trap. King to a8, bishop to c3, bishop takes, still bad time to take with the pawn right here. Bishop comes back to b4 and takes, pawn down to d4, queen d2, queen up here to a7, but you can see how bad this is after pawn to b5. Now this is pinning down the queen. There's no way not for black to lose this material. So it's not going to be good, and you kind of get the sense that Ray Robson's probably not even looking at that at all anyway. Decides, yeah, I'm not going to take that material, so just not an option. Now, if I were going to take it, I would have taken it earlier. So after the bishop to c3, bishop takes, we do see an exchange on the board now, an isolated pawn for whites on the c file. Not something that white really wants there. Bishop to e6, rook over here e1, rook to e8, just trying to counterattack in the center of the board here. Pawn to h3, controlling the square on g4. Pawn h5, so Ray pushing on the king side of the board. Rook to e7, just doubling up on the e file. Queen to c5, but just has a sense that white's just throwing as much as he can at Ray, but Ray is just not breaking at all. Still has a great pawn structure here. His king is pretty safe because he has the queen protecting it. There's just not enough material to really continue to attack here. King to b8, queen up here to a d6 check, king to c8, queen down here c5, just no real way to continue here. King to d8, and then pawn g3, just not doing too much. I mean, what is white really going to try to do here instead? Maybe c4, try to break up the center. So, d file, then you could swing your rook over here to d1 and attack. That's an option. But decides to go ahead and play pawn to g3. Doesn't do too much on the board in all reality. Pawn now takes on b5. The knight has finally fallen. After the pawn captures here, the queen's under attack. Queen swings back here to c7. Pinning down this pawn here on g3. Not that this pawn's really going to be going anywhere anytime soon. But the queen comes back here to d4. King to d7, rook up here to a4, and you can see it starting to slip away here. Black has equal amount of pawns, but he does have the minor piece, and that bishop's going to be able to control most of the board because it is an open board state. So rook over here to c8, pawn up here to c4, queen down here c5, says, yeah, I'll go ahead and exchange material if you want to. So after the pawn takes, bishop to f5. Rook up here to e7, says, yeah, that is great with me. King to e5, check. King d7, and then we see an exchange on the board of the queens. That's exactly what Ray is looking for. He has a huge advantage as far as the material, so try to get all the big pieces off the board. Pretty much eliminates all the threats that white has. So after pawn g4, king e5, just getting that involved into the game. Rook down to f3. We do see an exchange in the board, and now bishop to g4 attacking the rook. There's just not much more that Jeffrey can do here. After rook to b8, controlling this pawn right here. This pawn is no longer going anywhere. This king can just go around and gobble up material in tandem with this light square bishop. So in the end, we do have Jeffrey Xiong had decided to resign, and Ray Robson gets the victory. So a lot of exciting matches so far in the U.S. Chess Tournament. Hopefully everyone has been following along, seeing all the matches. I know we do coverage each day of a game that I find particularly fascinating to cover. But hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Hopefully you're enjoying the coverage that I'm sharing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for round number 5.